Hey everyone, welcome back to the Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. Our vision is to inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo. We bring you weekly topics and thought-provoking guests to get you to stop, reflect, and think about what it means to be a leader in a modern world. Our aim is to help you become the leader you wish you always had as we learn together and lead together. Please enjoy the show. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project podcast for Season 2. We're really delighted that you've joined us again this year. As we kick off, we'd like to start off by saying Happy New Year to all of our dear listeners. We hope that 2022 brings you great joy and great fulfillment. As we kick off into Season 2, we'd like to share in this episode some of the highlights from Season 1. We fully believe that lifelong leaders are lifelong learners, and we've embraced that as we've gone about in this show, and we've learnt so many things from our dear guests during Season 1, and I'd like to share some of those with you today. And it really fits perfectly with our motto here at the Leadership Project, which is to learn together and lead together. I had a lot of personal learnings from the guests that we had on the show. And I have to admit, it's probably changed my thinking about what it means to be a leader, and it's changed the way I go about recording this show and interviewing the guests. Now, Season 1 kicked off with the obligatory intro show. So in Episode 1, we shared with you our vision, our purpose, our values, the reasons why we're doing the show. That we believe that there is a leadership crisis in the world and that we need to help people to rethink what it means to be a leader so that we can get back to places where people truly love their jobs and like their bosses again, which is something that's very much missing in the world today. And then we got into our series of guest interviews, and we started with Episode 2, which was a panel of inspiring women at Cubic. We brought together a wonderful panel of inspiring women leaders at the same time as International Women's Day 2021, and we asked them deep questions about what they think it means to be a leader, and in particular, how we can inspire more women to get into leadership roles. And it was a wonderful discussion. And that introduces our first theme for the learnings of the year. So the first theme in the year would be around diversity, inclusion, and bias. And it starts with diversity of thought, bringing together a group of diverse people from all walks of life, different races, gender, socioeconomic background, everything to come together to enrich our thinking by embracing that diversity of thought. It also kicked in to a very deep discussion around inclusiveness and the importance of inclusion in the workplace. Diversity and inclusion often get coupled together, but really they're complementary things that are not quite the same. So we dig a little bit deeper about what we learn about inclusion and inclusiveness in Season 1. First thing is to think about the opposite of inclusion, and that's exclusion. And all of us have felt this at some point in our lives, that feeling that you don't quite belong, whether it was in high school or in the workplace or in some kind of social environment where you felt like an outsider. And it feels horrible. We all know that. So the first thing about inclusion is to never make someone feel excluded. And then it goes deeper than that. We started to discuss that inclusion is not the same as assimilation. So we don't expect people to just be like us and then they'll fit in. So it brings about this tricky balance where we need to avoid any kind of unconscious bias or even conscious prejudice behaviour and not treating someone differently because of their background and their race, their religion, whoever they are, but at the same time, celebrating their differences. Celebrate their culture. Celebrate their uniqueness and the diversity that that brings. And what it really means is seeing the whole of the person. Celebrating that person. Celebrating them for who they are, but not discriminating against them because of who they are. And this came up several times throughout the series. Episode 4 with Sulin Lau from Grab, what an inspiring leader she was, and sharing the great approach that they take at Grab around inclusion and around diversity of thought. It was reinforced in episode 11 with Parmer, who really drove that message home about how diversity and inclusion inspired her to join her company Celerity and how Celerity managed that in the way that they go about their business. In episode 32, Gary Williams really drove home that message about personality, about uniqueness, about celebrating and recognizing your own uniqueness, and then celebrating and recognizing uniqueness in others. And then Dr. Alessandra Wall in episode 27. Wow, this was just an amazing episode. The purpose of that episode was to talk a lot about attracting and retaining female talent into businesses and giving women rewarding careers. And organizations around the world do struggle with that. But then Dr. Alessandra really challenged our thinking and opened our minds. She wanted us to understand that underneath it all, everyone is biased. It's come from your upbringing. It's somewhat ingrained in you. But what sets exceptional people aside, people that are high-performing leaders that are able to manage this, is about how they respond and react to that bias. The first thing is to notice it, which is challenging in its own right. So being able to pick up when you are experiencing some level of unconscious bias and bring it to your consciousness. And this is something that takes practice, and it takes observation skills that you need to nurture. And as that bias creeps in, you need to be able to notice it, name it, and what you do about it. That's what sets people apart. So, food for thought here. Acknowledge that everyone has some level of bias in them, but the people that set themselves apart from the crowd are those that are able to notice that bias and then respond in an appropriate way, in a way that is not prejudicial, in a way that celebrates differences and doesn't discriminate based on differences. Then, that was then amplified again with Corey Patrick White in episode 19, following on from his groundbreaking TEDx talk about algorithmic bias. And he enlightened us with this vision that the world is in a place where social media and the algorithms in social media are amplifying those biases. And that all of us need to be aware of that. We need to be aware of that when we're consuming information. And he spoke to us about having rivers of information that we trust, that we know that are from good sources, that are not giving us a biased view of the world. But then also the ethical dilemma that as leaders, particularly if you're a leader in a technology field, that as we bring new technology to the world, it is incumbent upon us to make sure that that new technology is being used in ethical ways. And it's not just about making sure that you use it in ethical ways. It's having the foresight to be able to see whether there's any unintended consequences from the technology that you're delivering. So, the first theme, diversity, inclusion, and bias. The next big theme that came through season 1 was about the importance of purpose, meaning, and impact. And that was highlighted from early on with Lisa Partridge in episode 10. We were talking with Lisa about communication skills, but something really came through for me in that episode, which was that people want to feel like they matter. Feeling like you matter means that you have some kind of meaning to your world. The work that you do has some kind of impact. And that was further reinforced in episode 23 with the inspirational Kim Abbott, who's the CEO and founder of Vested, someone that I'm extremely proud of, that I was involved in her early days. I was one of her first bosses. And then to see what she's made of herself since, to go on and create this amazing organization that some of the world's largest institutional banks are now using to govern the way that they invest trillions of dollars to make sure that that money is being invested in organizations that have a social conscience and are treating the world in an ethical and appropriate way. And Kim really brought home from her early days as an engineer that what was important to her was the impact of what she did. It wasn't what she did that was important. It was the impact of what she did. And sharing those amazing stories that engineers don't build bridges, they connect communities. That engineers don't build prosthetic limbs, that they give people their life back, give them quality of life by the things that they produce. So really hitting home that message that it's the impact of what we do, not what we do, that's important. It came up again in episode 27 with Dr. Alessandra Wall when she was talking to us about attracting and retaining women into the workforce, or vice versa, retaining and attracting women into the workforce, that one of the things that women in particular are strongly looking for is to have purpose, meaning, and impact in what they do. Gary Williams, once again, in helping us understand our own personality and our own uniqueness, and what your purpose is a big part of your uniqueness, and therefore take the time to understand your purpose and understand how it drives you. But then it all comes to this beautiful, beautiful culmination by Zach Mercurio, the best-selling author of the book The Invisible Leader. And he led us on this path that just described it so beautifully about purpose and meaning. And for those that are in our Facebook community group, a number of us then went headfirst in and took part in a 7-day challenge with Zach to find our own purpose and meaning, asking ourselves questions every day about what we loved doing, what we were good at, how did it make us feel, and recording that for 7 days to see whether anything emerged. And for me, it certainly did. He spoke to us about doing an Ikigai exercise, which is once again mapping what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be rewarded for. And if you can find the intersection of those 4 things, then you're finding your purpose and you're finding your vocation, your calling about what you can do in the world. And we spoke then about the importance of that as a leader, not to just have a purpose in your life and to have meaning, but to be able to communicate that to your team. And when you do so, when you're able to paint that vision with purpose and meaning and impact to people and communicate it really clearly, you're going to attract people around you that share that same vision, that share that same passion. And before you know it, you'll be building a high-performance team of people that believe the same things that you believe, that believe in the cause of what you're trying to do. And when someone believes in that cause, they're going to work with you and work at it with such a passion and such energy, much more than just working for a paycheck. So number 2, about purpose, meaning, and impact. Number 3, one of my favorites as well, the importance of relationships. And this came through so solidly in episode 39 with David Knorr of the Knorr Group and the best-selling author of 11 books, I believe, one of which is his latest release called Curve Benders. And Knorr really captured this perfectly for me, that leadership is 100% about how you relate to other people. That business is about people. And to quote John C. Maxwell for a moment, if you don't understand people, you don't understand business. So Knorr really brought this message really home about investing in relationships and finding those curve benders that can really, by you helping them, they help you and you help each other. And before you know it, you've multiplied your impact on the world. He also brought home the message about being authentic, because everyone has some level of BS radar. And if you're not authentic, people pick up on it very quickly. So when we say invest in relationships, we mean invest authentically with your whole heart, with your whole purpose, helping that other person. And in doing so, you're building these co-creating relationships where you end up helping each other. So when someone helps you, you help them. And you also pay it forward. You pay it forward by helping other people. And this is what makes the world go round. And I challenge you here to really think about that. Think about successes that you've had in your life. Were those successes based around what you know, what you did, or were they based around investing in relationships and helping people and helping each other? The next big theme that I want to share with you is uncovering further this understanding of how people learn and how that might impact the way that you go about your leadership. This started in episode 16 with Coach Adrian Tilly Lefebvre, who is the human solar panel, about reflecting back to people the best in themselves and drawing out from them the best version of themselves. And that then built on discussions around Glass's pyramid and choice theory and things like that people only remember 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, 30% of what they see, 50% of what they see and hear. But then this is when the game changing starts. They remember 70% of what they discuss with other people. They remember 80% of what they experience for themselves. And they remember 95% of something that they learn so much about that they're able to then teach it to someone else. When you start thinking about that, it really changes the way you think about your leadership. Instead of trying to teach people or tell them what to do, we really need to get them discussing and engaging and owning it themselves. And when they get that level of ownership, when they've experienced it for themselves, when they've talked about it with their peers, where they're in some kind of cohort-based learning approach where they're going on a journey of discovery, they'll remember it forever. Whereas if you've just taught them something, they'll only remember it for as long as it's convenient to do so. And that beautifully came together in episode 35 with the absolutely amazing Lee Prosenjak. OMG, this guy, such passion, such energy. Wow, just what a great facilitator. It was such a pleasure having him on the show. And he demonstrated to us the importance of asking the right questions, cutting through and getting through to the real answer of what is troubling someone, what is making someone tick, what is their passion, what's really going on in their life, by asking the right questions, by pausing and giving them the space to be able to share with you what's going on in their world. And that is what really draws out of people what is actually going on, and is so transformative for them, and it's transformative for you. And this was further emphasized in episode 36 with Ryan Sanders about leading by learning. Just a wonderful episode, a wonderful discussion that I hope that you catch. Okay, next big transformative one for me, deep listening. This is a breakthrough moment for me. Episode 14 with Don Campbell. This was one of the ones that changed a lot of the way that I go about the podcast. And it was the biggest surprise of the year and the biggest surprise of the season. Don Campbell is a 71-year-old sculptor from the artistic world. And going into the interview, you're already starting to think, well, what can we learn about leadership from someone from the artistic world? And the path that we were going on was to start thinking about creativity. How do you inspire creativity in your team? How do you unlock creativity in yourself? But what we discovered were profound lessons on deep listening. As it turns out, Don is I'm going to call him an unofficial scholar of Otto Scharmer's work around Theory U and about deep listening. And what he shared with us, I'm going to say changed my life from that moment onwards, changed the way I go about my leadership, my coaching, and the way I interview podcast guests. So deep listening is going beyond listening to what you already know, or in many cases, listening for what you want to hear. And it gets to the point of really listening with an open mind. And I want to challenge you here and really for you to think about, do you do that? Do you do that every day? Do you listen with an open mind? Or do you go into most conversations with a preconceived idea about what's going to be discussed and what it all means and the intentions of the other person, etc.? So listening with an open mind. Next level is listening with an open heart. So you're actually listening to the emotion of what's going on as well. Not just what is going on, not even just why it's going on, but listening to the emotions of how the other person feels and what it means to them. And then finally, one very challenging one, listening with an open will. And listening with an open will is about being able to let go of everything and unlearn what you think you already know and discover a new reality. It is this kind of thinking that ends up with the realization that the earth is not flat, as an example, right? So getting to that open will thinking is about conceiving new realities and then making them come to life. And together with my training with Coach Masters Academy, this is what's changed the way that I interview people from that moment onwards. And I'd be curious to know in the audience if you've picked up any change to my interview style throughout season 1. And I put that down to Don Campbell. I'm using a lot of coaching techniques that I learnt from Coach Masters Academy and the International Coaching Federation through my training. But I'm also embracing every time I think about Don Campbell. As I go into every interview, I think about Don Campbell. And I think about, okay, am I going to listen with an open mind? Am I going to listen with an open heart? Am I going to listen to an open will, with an open will? And you'll probably see there that I then double click on what my interview guest is telling me. So instead of having a preconceived list of all of the questions I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask those questions no matter what, all I have now is bullet points. And I deeply listen to my interview guest. And if they say something that I believe is interesting, either for myself or for you, the dear audience, I then double click on it and say, oh, tell me more about that. And when you said that, what did you mean by this? And it's really changed the way that I interview people, and it's changed the way I learn from each of those interview guests. And I'm so grateful to Don Campbell for everything that he showed us. And I'm grateful for Coachmasters Academy for the training that I went through during 2021. Then beyond that, we learnt so many practical skills that we can apply as leaders. We had wonderful interviews with Lisa Partridge, episode 10, and Chris Hewitt in episode 17 about communication skills. And deep listening is certainly part of that, by the way. But Lisa and Chris were really able to bring that home with some really strong messages. So Lisa is the head of her organisation, Six Comms, and I'm really proud to say she's now launched her own podcast, which is a wonderful podcast. So please check out that as well. And Chris Hewitt is a former fighter pilot who is also a spoken word champion, a poet, just a wonderful communicator who runs an organisation helping organisations to improve their communication skills. We had a wonderful discussion with Ross Nichol about building high-performance teams and how to accelerate your team along the path to high performance. So getting through the forming, the norming, storming to performing as quickly as you can. And Ross shared with us his great insights on how he's done that throughout his career, through different types of workshops and different techniques. And I want to share a personal element here, that this enabled me to reconnect with Ross after not seeing him for many years, must have been close to a decade or maybe longer. And my family and I managed to catch up with Ross's family over Christmas. And it was just wonderful to see him again. It was one of the highlights of my holiday break for sure, to see his wonderful family. And it was such a reflection on what an amazing man, a wonderful man that Ross is, to see how delightful his family is. And I was not surprised whatsoever. And Ross and I are now going to stay in close contact always and help each other on our next journey. I also was able to reconnect with another dear friend in episode 21, David Morley, who shared so much with us about how you go about building trust and building engagement in his teams and how he does that with his organisation. Lisa Nesneski in episode 12, she taught us so much about mindfulness, which is something that all leaders need to look into and embrace. But the interesting thing that came out was a side thing from her 7 Mindful Questions, and she is the author of the book, 7 Mindful Questions, about how you can use those 7 mindful questions every day to help you to improve your prioritization of your own time and the prioritization of the time of your team. So if time management is something that you think is lacking in you and your team, please do check out episode 12 with Lisa Nesneski and see if you see the connection that I see about how to use those 7 mindful questions to ensure that you're using your time on the most important things. We also had different people talk to us about measurement, about how to measure culture, how to measure leadership. And episode 3, Sulin Lau shared with us the 4 H's from Grab about how they measure the culture of their business and how they measure whether leaders are supporting that culture. And then in episode 37, Michael Tanner, wow, what a great guy, the host of the Rookie Leaders podcast. And I'm pleased to say that I've also now been a guest on his podcast, on the Rookie Leaders podcast. Absolutely wonderful show and one that you should catch. Michael Tanner was sharing how his view of measurement leadership was born through his time in the US Marines, but he's built it upon that since he's left. So he's taken it to the next level. On episode 9, we had Joe, the brand builder Escobardo, another inspirational and great communicator. He talked to us about the importance of personal branding, but we also got into a conversation about how leaders need to be the greatest ambassador for the brands of the organizations that they represent. We had Faisal Shah in episode 6 talking to us about mentoring, but specifically about how you mentor millennials. And it is true that millennials do think a little differently. They're very much maligned generation of people. And it's very unfair when you get to the root of the way that they think and the things that inspire them, things like purpose and meaning, things like co-learning and that ability to collaboratively learn with other people, that they embrace things like gamification and that they enjoy learning in that way, that they like micro-learning and are putting that learning into practice, that they want to make a meaningful impact in the world. There is a lot to like about the way millennials think, but it is something that's been misunderstood for some time. So well worth catching that episode as well. Another dear friend that I was able to reconnect with once again after about a decade was Matt Lohmeyer. And he showed us about negotiation skills in episode 8. But more importantly, he demonstrated to us that negotiation skills are a life skill, that you can put those negotiation skills into practice in your daily life with your family, in your personal financial transactions, but then the importance of having strong negotiation skills when you're a leader of people. A wonderful episode, and please do make sure you check it out. More very practical tips came from Ariel O'Farrell in episode 29, building on from her best-selling book, The Manager's Dilemma. It gave us some great insight into how you need to shift gears when you become a leader, and a lot about that transition to leadership. Not only do you not have to be the answer to every question, but in doing so, if you do that, it holds you back and it makes your team reliant on you. So she spoke a lot about how you empower people and what to do when you're a leader, when you get that knock on the door and people keep on coming to you asking the same questions over and over again. Or you get that feeling that they're asking you a question that they already know the answer to, and how as a leader you can turn that around and ask them the right questions in a way that empowers them, enables them, engages them, and inspires them into great action. Brett Larson in episode 38, this one was really interesting. The author of the upcoming book, Leaders with a capital L, he spoke a lot about distributed leadership and about a new emerging trend called team coaching. And I definitely think that you should catch that episode as well. Jake Jacobs in episode 33, talking to us about change. The people don't fear change. They just don't like being changed. So Jake shared wonderful stories about how to draw people into a change effort. And if they're part of that process, a true part of the process, so they're not getting changed, they're part of a change process, that they will go into it with a lot of energy and you'll end up with a far more transformative result by embracing them in that. And finally, episode 25, Dr. Olivia Ong really shared us some wonderful stories around World Mental Health Day on avoiding burnout from someone who has been through that herself. So if you're one that has a tendency towards burnout, or you're managing people that you're worried about their burnout, Dr. Olivia Ong in episode 25. So 39 episodes in season 1. They're just some of the highlights and some of the things that we took away. I promised to share with you, well, how has that impacted us and influenced us at the Leadership Project about what we do? The first thing, we've rethought about our mission and we've rewritten it. I'm going to give you the draft right now. So we've converted our mission to really build on some of those things that we've learnt in season 1. We want to help leaders to create amazing teams and workspaces. Workspaces where people have purpose and meaning in what they do, where they feel their voices are heard and their opinions are valued, and where they feel that they individually and collectively matter. And we believe that if we give leaders the skills and tools that they need to create that kind of workspace, that in turn, it has a great impact on the world, because people will start falling in love with their jobs again and getting more engaged in their workplace and in their teams. All of these episodes have reinforced our values of diversity of thought, of inclusiveness, our belief that leadership is not a rank, that different is not necessarily wrong, and the importance of empathy and treating people the way they want to be treated. All of these things were already our values at the start of season 1, but everything we heard from our guests have doubled down on the importance of those values. It's reinforced our way of working. Episode 14, Don Campbell, I can't stop talking about it. The use of deep listening has changed the way that I do interviews. Understanding how people learn has changed the way I lead people, has changed the way I communicate, and changed the way that I coach people. How to engage people and inspire them have all came from our great guest in season 1. So looking forward into 2022, you're going to see some big announcements coming, and I'm going to give you a teaser of some of those in next week's episode. But you're going to find all of the things that the Leadership Project is bringing you in 2022 and in season 2, build upon and use those techniques of deep listening about understanding how people learn so that we can increase our impact on the world. And the final crescendo, I've got to bring it back to this, is the importance of relationships. I owe a personal huge debt to David Knorr. Knorr's interview was eye-opening. You will see a very personal approach in the way that the Leadership Project engages with you, our audience, as we go forward. We are here to serve you, and we're going to invest in those relationships to help you become the leader that you wish you always had. And finally, I'd like to close out with a big thanks to my team. Faris Sadek, who does the editing of all of our videos and all of our audio content every week. Faris is just a gem, absolutely megastar, and we're so glad that we have him on board. Gerald Calabo, I get a lot of comments from people saying, oh, you're on social media a lot, Mick. Well, I've got to say it's Gerald that is the one that is our social media curator, and he gets out there with those messages to make sure that we're out there getting our message out there as far as we can and with a level of consistency, and Gerald does a wonderful job. And our operations manager and my dear wife, Say Spears, for her operational support, but also her emotional support, and the way that she supports the Leadership Project on every level is just amazing. And it's for all of you out there to have a partner and wife who is so supportive is a true, cherished gift and something that I'm grateful for every day. And to you, our dear audience, thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to bringing you much, much more in season 2. So that's it for today. Now remember, everyone out there, please do take care. Look out for each other. Always remember to challenge the status quo, and remember to learn together and lead together. And we'll bring you more soon. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Project podcast at mickspears.com. I'm your host, Mick Spears. Sound design and editing by Faris Sadek. Social media by Gerald Calabo. And special thanks to our operations manager, Say Spears. We appreciate you, and we appreciate your time today. You can catch the video podcast and our series of shorter videos by subscribing to the Leadership Project YouTube channel. And you can join the conversation at our Facebook community group. We look forward to bringing you another great interview next week as we learn together and lead together. In the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and always remember to challenge the status quo.